everybody, and welcome to another episode of Generally Casual. I am one of your co-hosts, Michael, and we've got a squinty Richard over here and a non-squinty Corey.
Yep, my eyes are wide open.
I'm very squinty. I'm
Yes.
trying to see. Oh, yeah, we're good.
You need glasses this week?
I do.
He actually has glasses.
I do somewhere.
Sunglasses?
No,
They don't
reading
count.
glasses.
No, it changes vision from 1920 to 2020.
Oh, okay. There we go.
So wait, do I normally see in 2021 or do I normally see in 1920?
Well, hindsight's 2020, Richard. So
That doesn't even make any sense.
I see in 1920 by 1080.
You know what? You guys know what wasn't around in 1920? MOBAs.
Not right.
That's true.
Yes, because the second word of that letter. Yep,
I mean, trench warfare was almost like MOBAs.
Except for it's not online.
I bet you there's a lot of people out there who wouldn't like that comment.
No,
It's offline.
Offline play.
But
Offline.
we are talking about MOBAs today. Thank you, Michael, for reining us back in.
Yes.
And specifically, MOBAs unite in the terms of we're speaking about every MOBA that we can talk about right now.
Yeah, and if
They
you have
all
any MOBAs we didn't talk about, that's probably because they're not popular and we don't care about them.
I mean, to be fair,
you can always tell us about them on Facebook or any other social media platform.
the reason why this subject came up is because the three of us started playing a new MOBA that was just released about a week and a half ago.
Yeah, Pokemon Unite.
Pokemon Unite.
Also known as Baby's first MOBA. I'm
Corey's-
the baby
yeah,
in this
Corey's the
situation.
baby.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to be honest, around the time we first started doing our podcast, I would never have envisioned I'd be playing a Pokemon MOBA.
No, not at all.
That's true. I don't think I would have either. But logically, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, Pokemon fight each other. Why not just put it on a MOBA map?
You know, ironically, I think it is kind of the last Pokemon game that set that up because they set it up to be like the whole like stadium/soccer-esque idea. And then the way that their MOBA is
battle
set
stadiums.
It's very sports-like.
Well, I mean,
it's got a big sport feel to it.
they actually kind of brought that in to kind of go Pokemon segue in the N64 with Pokemon Stadium. They kind of literally like brought that whole feeling in. It was just one Pokemon versus one Pokemon.
Yeah.
And then they branched off into multi-Pokemon battles in later Pokemon games. And then they kind of enveloped all of that in Stadium and all of that. And then now they have this thing that kind of encompasses all of their ideas.
Yeah, kind of makes sense.
Very much so.
This is my first MOBA. So
We should
a
explain
long time
what MOBAs
ago,
are.
yeah, I would have not. I've played like League once, and I was not interested in it. So I have no idea what MOBA actually means.
Yeah. So MOBA stands for...
Also, it's not boba. You're not drinking these.
Yes, just starts with an M, not
I
a B.
wish it was Pokemon Boba.
Hey, maybe when we go to Japan, we can find Pokemon boba and then play a
bet
MOBA
you.
while drinking Pokemon boba.
Oh, man.
What does boba mean? I mean, boba mean, Richard.
I'm not... That's not what the
It
subject
means
is about.
passively online.
Passively.
It's not passive either. It's not even massive.
It means
it's multiplayer. Multiplayer online battle arena. That's literally what MOBA stands for. The basic concept is two teams of players compete against each other on a battlefield. The key differentiating factor in MOBAs is that each player plays as a single character with a set of abilities. And then as they kind of do stuff, depending on what the MOBA is, you do stuff and then you get XP or currency, and then you buy items and you improve your character as the match goes on. But at the end of each match, it resets. So then the next match, you start whichever character you play, level 1, no items, all that other stuff.
Also, classic MOBAs is, I believe they usually have what's called creep. Creep are little minions.
Oh, creeps.
Yeah,
Yes.
creeps.
Yeah.
Are little minions that crawl across the battlefield. They creep across the battlefield, and they do battle with each other. And then the heroes or the player-controlled characters can come in and affect that, so that way the creep can keep pushing towards the other side.
Well, and that's more or less what the most common and basic versions of MOBAs are. It has 3 lanes. There's a top lane, a middle lane, and a bottom lane. And then there's neutral territory in between those lanes. The creeps will literally start from one base on either corner, and then they just kind of meet up in the middle and battle each other. And then the main thing is that's how the players get their XP or currency or whatever. But then in the middle, in between those lanes, there's usually what's called a jungle, which there's usually like forest area or jungle area that also have just standstill creeps.
Neutral.
Yeah. And the other player, the fifth player on the team, usually will run around and roam around the map trying to kill those, and that's how that player gets their XP. And
sometimes there's cool bosses or thematic themes to the map that could be in these areas. It depends how complicated your MOBA experience wants to be in that general sense. And then even on top of that, there's equipment you could put on the characters, and then it just gets really complicated.
Yeah.
And you definitely want to do your research on certain MOBAs before you even get started on them. But Baby's first MOBA over here, like Pokemon, is a great... There's definitely other ones out there that are great examples of going, hey, we're just going to get you used to doing lanes and controlling a character. That's all you need to worry about.
I will say, and we'll probably cover this later also, because I think we'll go more in depth in what Pokemon brings to the MOBA table. But Pokemon Unite does not have creeps in the traditional sense.
Yeah.
There are not little dudes running from bases. They're stationary
camps.
Pokemon camps. If you think of it as I explained earlier about the jungle and how there's just neutral creeps that just stand there, that's the entirety of Pokemon. They're just literally enemies that just pop up and they're like, all right, come kill me.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting too is that in the jungle version of Pokemon, there's like specific enemies that will give buffs, and they're really important. And then everything else seems to be, instead of being creeps, because obviously they're stationary, I think it's more like, I would prefer the term like fodder. Like you just kill them to level up. And that is like what you compete for in a lane mostly is
and
like...
If you're used to MOBAs, that's a normal thing in a lot of MOBAs. There's some buff camps, there's experience camps, and then there's boss camps. Well, and they each do their own separate thing, but... What's great about MOBAs is if you look far enough back to what we're going to get to in a second, like the start of them, you could even look further beyond the first MOBA and look at tower defense games being the initial start of what a MOBA is. Because tower defense games came before MOBAs, because they're really, really old. They're basically lanes that creeps or mobs run down, and then you set up things on the side of them to kill them.
Yeah, MOBAs, you just swapped the AI for another player, essentially.
Exactly. And
you instead of you putting down multiple towers and they just kind of auto-fire, you are controlling the character that does the firing and the abilities.
Yeah, and then you can control, and instead of learning how to maze, then they're already going down a certain pathway, and you just have to kill them before they get down the path.
Yeah.
Which actually makes sense, because in reality, the first MOBA, according to what my research, was called Aeon of Strife, and it was a custom map for StarCraft 1. It was made by a user named Gunner Forever. But it had 4 players, each controlling a character.
It was a hero from the game.
Yeah, that was the thing, is literally the only known characters, and I scoured that could be found, were Tassadar and a Zergling that was called Small Creepy Killer. But it was known that there were 8 playable characters, and it was differentiating between 3 or 4 lanes. Most MOBAs nowadays are 3 lanes or less, but the main differentiation is this Aeon of Strife was actually players versus AI. So it just was basically creeps that were coming down, and then I think they had like a random AI bot that would come down and try and kill. That actually evolved into, a lot of people would know probably this, which is Dota, which is called Defense of the Ancients. It was created in 2003, and that was on Warcraft 3. It was done as a map editor on Warcraft 3.
I really didn't know what Dota stood for. I just always was like, it's Dota. It's a weird word. But no, it's an anagram. And then I also didn't know that they started out as mods. Like, that's really crazy that someone just changed the game enough and then was like, hey, this is a new game in a game. And everyone's like, we really like this. Good job.
Make gameplay. I mean, it almost did what Fortnite did to the genres of going, hey, do you like battle royales? Okay, now everybody has a battle royale.
Yeah.
It's like, do you like MOBAs? Okay, now everybody has MOBAs, because shortly after this Dota style came out, there was a map for any different genre that you could want, like
that character skins.
Yeah,
like a Naruto one.
Yeah, there was Naruto ones. There was just a full blown anime one that had characters from all over the place. There was like sometimes your favorite TV shows would have them, or people would get really adventurous, and the worst maps would be like for things that didn't really make sense.
Well, it makes sense too, considering like StarCraft was insanely popular throughout Asia as a competitive esport. And then it makes sense to transition to something like Dota or League, where it's essentially that game but simplified, and a generalized audience can understand what's going on a little bit better because they can jump in at any point of that game and understand what's happening. It makes sense, and that is kind of why some of the best players tend to be from South Korea, that sort of area. Because they love these MOBA style games.
Well, and it actually has a lot to do with the micro movements. So StarCraft and StarCraft 2 and Warcraft and stuff like that were really big in those Asian countries because it was all about management of resources and micromanagement of units.
Mm-hmm.
So what MOBAs do is they take away a lot of the micromanaging of units and do micromanagement of a unit.
Yeah.
And you just have to be really good at what you're doing, specifically understanding your own resource management, how your character plays, and then a big thing in MOBAs as well is what's called vision, which basically everybody can't see everything that's going on the map. And the only time you can see what's going on with an enemy is if someone else sees them.
And we've talked about this in a previous podcast. It's called Fog of War.
Yeah, I was actually just going to mention that is one thing, and we'll probably mention later, about things that we would like in certain MOBAs. And for me, like, obviously Pokemon is the one I can relate to, but Pokemon doesn't have a Fog of War, so it's not quite clear how far you can see. And I feel like that would be something that would be nice to have.
It does, sort of.
It just, there's no visual Fog of War, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does not have a gray overlay on the map of what you can't see, but it does clearly have a way of going, hey, if your people aren't close to this person, you can't see them.
Yeah.
So it just removes the gray layer of the map, but it keeps the idea of, well, you can't see everything that's going on the map at all times. But if they're near your minions or near a camp, you'll be able to see them.
Yes. Oh, and that's the main thing also is Pokemon has a smaller map versus a map like League. It's pretty big, and as you run around, the main thing that League also has is basically like little totems that provide vision to certain areas or provide visions, to like certain bushes. So they will put a specific item down in a bush that they know enemies will check constantly.
And if you don't know, bushes allow you to hide, which Pokemon does have.
Yes. Yeah. Grass area, tall grass.
And typically, a MOBA we're going to talk about in the future does not do this, but typically MOBAs are top down.
Yes.
They're in that third person. It's not third person. Top down view.
It's almost like isometric-ish.
Yes, it's very flat looking. That they try to provide a nice 3D
like
look
Diablo.
Yes. But there's a few MOBAs that kind of break the genre by making them third person or first person. We'll talk about those in a bit.
Yeah. So, going back to the history. So, Dota actually branched out a lot, as Michael just pointed out. And then it kind of solidified into what was called Dota All-Stars. That was kind of the culmination of all the different versions of Dota through all the different teams. And I don't remember exactly how the team split up or which team split up between the different versions of Dota. But basically what ended up happening is a specific version of Dota, and then the team from Dota All-Stars, they all kind of got to know each other, and they basically created teams of developers and eventually created League of Legends and Dota 2. Those then became pretty much the two most popular MOBAs, and increasingly successful. It's still played today. Both of them are. Dota 2 at one point, they have an invitational that happens every year where they basically Steam sells specific stuff during an open window for the invitational, and whatever money they raise from that specific thing then gets which team wins gets that money basically.
Oh wow.
And they've like had like $10 million like crazy high pots for that. And then, I mean, League is just ridiculously popular, has tons and tons of different sponsorships, and not anymore, but it used to be pretty much the number one thing on Twitch every single year, most months.
Funnily, that all of this came from the StarCraft map editor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So little sidestep before we move on. Outside of Pokemon, because I think that probably we could all agree that that is kind of the most beginner friendly foray into the genre.
I would say absolutely.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Between these two, because these two kind of are the reigning kings of MOBA, I think it's pretty safe to say. What do you guys prefer? What would you recommend to someone if you were to recommend a MOBA?
I've played both of them.
Neither.
Neither?
Yeah.
Don't
No?
play either one of those mobile. And we'll get to that. I'm going to talk about that, but for now, if you want to know, it's salty. It's very salty. There's salty
Okay, but
games.
if you take the toxicity out,
I would
based on,
still
like,
say don't play them.
no, oh, okay, all right, that's
So-
a definitive answer.
I would say between the two, League, both of them have extremely toxic communities, but from gameplay alone, League tends to be a little more simple. Dota is a lot more manage heavy. They're
Bit closer to StarCraft.
well, the main thing that the Dota can have you do versus League you can't is you can take creeps away from the opposing team.
Oh,
So you can kill any creep on the map and last hit them to take it away from the other player.
Got
versus
it.
in League you can't do that.
Both of those games have a very complicated management to each character that I'm sure they've improved on since I've played them. But like too many people I know used to play those games and then just play the ARAM modes
Yeah,
and
those
then
are
have fun with those. And I'm like, yeah, they're really fun. You just play a random character in a random map, and you know, it's good fun. But I know a lot of people would rather like try to get into more competitiveness in it and learn a lot about them because if they're gonna invest time. MOBAs, at least those MOBAs, aren't worth the investment.
You're
you,
also very
right.
behind.
Yeah.
Like the game has been out since 2009?
And I don't believe that means that you can't be good at it.
No.
It's just not worth the time versus having fun with it because you're going to go through so many bad matchups and bad, games. And there's going to be a chat system on there that people are just going to be like, oh, you're trash, you're terrible, like, why are you playing this game, uninstall. And it's just not worth the time to get into those right now. And I would say they definitely have people who are probably getting them like now and having fun with them, but there are other games that are a lot more friendly that I would recommend over them.
I mean, Here's a Storm, definitely.
And that's the thing, is if you're going to play, my biggest thing to take away from even like battle royales is they're a genre that could encompass whatever you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be the best one out there for you to understand how to play it. And I think MOBAs are out there going, why don't you just play the one that you thematically like the best?
Yes.
So that also was my biggest problem with League of Legends and Dota is like the lore of the game was all made up.
Well, but that's
And
the thing for me is League, I thought, did a much better job. And like
Their
they have a
music
lot of visuals. They
videos,
have music videos. They have little animation videos. A lot of what they do with their characters is really progress them. Even though, yeah. Versus like Dota kind of doesn't do that as much. They're just like, this is a character and it's fun.
And you would say, though, if you're going to get into a game, might as well get into the oldest game that's out there, which is Dota was the original. I mean, why do you think League of Legends looks so identical to it?
Oh, yeah.
And the only reason why, like, Dota's always been popular, but they didn't have an actual game till, like, 2013. Like, they had Dota
later,
but it was mostly built out of the map editor. And then then Dota 2 came along, which was a standalone and had nothing to do. Like, you didn't need StarCraft or Warcraft to play it.
Got it.
Even though in the new updated version of Warcraft 3, that's all back there, and people are playing them again.
Yeah. I think actually someone did make a that Aeon original as well for the new Warcraft.
Coming with MOBAs is a whole slew of terminology. We're not going to go through every word today, but
Thank
there
you.
are some important words that we should cover.
Well, and we've already actually kind of covered a couple of them already.
Good
Yeah.
amount, yeah.
And not every MOBA uses them. Like ADC, like Pokemon, you don't even need to know about the word.
No, but
if you go
that's
on YouTube-
interchangeable.
Yeah, if you go on YouTube though, you will see some YouTubers who are saying things like ADC, APC, or carries, which it doesn't apply to Pokemon in the same way because it's not as wide of a map. And when you don't have 3 lanes in a map, those aren't as important.
So,
But the terminology can still be used, but because like a 3-lane map is important because you have everybody already assigned, like pre-assigned to what they should be doing.
yes.
But in Pokemon, there's only 2 lanes, and it's very obvious that you have 2 and 2, and 1 is the jungle. It's the 3 lanes. It's like, okay, well, everybody has to be in a lane, but one of the lanes might be one of the 2 lanes might have a jungler, one of the 1 lane might have a jungler, and it's a lot more confusing talking about what task your character should be taking.
That's why the roles are more important. So in the basics outside of Pokemon, even kind of applies to Pokemon. ADC and APC are AD carry and AP carry. The differentiating is ability power versus ability damage. Basically, one of them will do more on their basic attack versus one of them powers up their abilities. There's different stats associated with that. That's really the only difference between the two. But in terms of Pokemon, how they differentiate is usually melee versus ranged character. So the ranged characters are more ability power characters because you're not just using basic attacks, you're kind of comboing with all of your abilities.
And they can poke better.
Yeah, versus melee characters usually have some sort of engage where they're actively getting on the character and then kind of keeping you in place or something like that to kind of hit you a bunch.
And they tend to do more damage per hit on their average, on their normal attacks and stuff
In
like
addition, with Pokemon, the reason why you don't have to use those terms is because it's such a reduction from an actual built-out MOBA that you're dealing with 2 abilities and a basic attack. It's not too complicated to know to know what to do. While like most other MOBAs have 4 or 5 other abilities and their basic attacks and equipment on top of that. And usually the equipment is like in the 50 or 60 item range that you need to know, like, this is the best equipment setup for this. But in this situation, you can do this. But if you're under leveled here, then you can use this one. But if you're over leveled, then you should go this way. It's like, okay, that's the biggest reason why I say don't play League of Legends or Dota, because they're so like.
Mind you, a lot of that has been streamlined.
Still,
That specifically in League, they and you're more or less right. It's a very complicated system that you really got to do research in order to figure out. Luckily,
People
League
have
in
done
general,
that,
League in general has recognized that and said this is ultra complicated. So we will give you recommendations to move into those directions. And all it really has to do with is whatever team you're playing against usually.
Yeah.
Because let's say another character on the opposing, if you are running in the middle lane and you are an ability power thing and you're using your abilities, well, the opposing character can then build out a resistance set so he doesn't take as much damage from your abilities. Yeah. That's really where both of those games are very, very complex, as opposed to the basics of each character is people have already mapped it out. You should level this ability next. You should do this next.
Yeah.
It's all the items that really cause the massive differentiation. But so we also have the top lane in terms of what most of these MOBAs are, which is usually a tank character or a peel character, which means they're beefy characters, or what they'll do is take attention away. So as an example, if you are grouped up as a 5 character team and you're going against their 5 character team, the job of that top laner or tank or peeler is basically to either take the tank away from the situation and kind of battle against, so that way all the rest of the characters can just focus on killing each other, or to basically distract one of the characters that's going to do a lot of damage, so that way then the rest of your team can focus. And then the last, which we already covered, is jungler. Their
gank.
Yeah, so their big thing is they support each of the lanes by roaming around the map, seeing where they're needed, and then what they do is gank, which means that they will basically surprise the enemy and try and kill them, or support you if you're in the lane by helping you kill whatever character.
And one of the important things that I've noticed from playing Pokemon, and once again, we've mentioned multiple times, it's a very simplified version, but that jungler slash ganker, it's kind of like you can tell a good one when they come in and they're already significantly higher leveled than everything else. Absolutely. Like they should be like 1 or 2 levels ahead of the pack in general, so that when they do come in, because normally junglers will have the abilities that do a big amount of burst damage, and then they need to get out because they can't sustain. They don't have any life steal. They don't have good defenses. They don't have a lot of health. They need to just do their damage and leave. So by being high leveled, they can have that big impact and then get out, refarm, build up more levels, and then support whatever lane needs the extra help.
Yeah.
And then the last role, which tends to be in the 3-lane MOBAs, is usually down with the AD carry in the bottom lane is a support. Now, those are basically your healers or their shield people, anything that can either reduce damage or debuff enemies. Mm-hmm. They're not there to be...
Or buff your allies.
Yeah, that's true. They're not there to basically attack things. They're not there to... They're there to support the entire team. Yep. And help them either stay alive or kill things faster.
So, question about that.
Mm-hmm,
Pokemon has a similar mechanic where they recommend what lane your character goes to. Top lane has more mobs, but bottom lane has more experience. Obviously, you can choose a character and go against the recommendation. So what's the benefit of being like, okay, well, healers are going to be on the bottom lane. Why would you send a healer and a healer against that when you could send like a tank and a high damage dealer on the bottom lane together, and they could just absorb whatever impact the opposing team had?
This is where the complication of bigger lane, multiple lane MOBAs are, and why Pokemon is for a baby. Because in the triple lanes, like, there's already a reason, like, there's certain camps by there that make more sense for this set of team to go after them. Like, even Pokemon, they're already pre-recommending that certain characters go to the bottom lane or top lane, usually just because people have already taken top lane, so it's like, hey, there's already people up there, go to the bottom. But normally it's because there's a certain type of camp that's there that's easier for this team to take out. So, example, in Pokemon, there's a Rotom at the top, mm-hmm. And that's easier for a certain set of team to take out rather than bottom. There's a Dreadnought. Yeah. And they both act differently and do different things, so it makes more sense for certain teams to go after certain mobs.
Got it.
Mobs, again, being just a group of minions or non-player characters that just sit there and wait to die. Get KO'd.
Yeah.
And that's personally why I would recommend my favorite MOBA that's out there, besides Pokemon, would be Smite. Smite's wonderful. It's based off of it's just based off gods and goddesses of all sorts of cultures that are out there. And it's a third-person MOBA instead of being a top-down. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit, you can get a little more invested in how things look because you're seeing it from a different viewpoint. You're seeing it from behind the character, kind of like Gears of War. And you get to see the layout of how everything is. It looks a lot more 3D. It's got a lot more that's involved in the game. Again, it's an old game like League of Legends and Dota is. But you can be a little more invested in it because, one, if you like gods and goddesses, there's no problem playing Smite. It's third person, and so I like that viewpoint. There's a lot less of a worry about equipment because it does that recommendation thing, but I'm guessing League of Legends has this now, but it has a way you can pre-build everything before you start the game. So it will auto-build all of your items and auto-level all of your abilities before you start, and you can set that up.
Because there's going to be a meta anyway, so there's no point, diverting attention to that sort of stuff.
In reality, in Smite, you can set that up anyway. You don't have to
do the
recommended. it'll still auto level for you,
But
but you can basically say, I want this skill leveled at this point.
You can also turn that off mid-game.
Yeah.
You can also pre-build your own equipment and, the scenarios for different items that would be there. And just not auto. Just during your death phase, you'd be like, okay, I'm going to buy that. And then you could buy while you're dead and then go in. There's some MOBAs where you can't buy while you're dead.
That's what League does. It's basically they'll give you a basic menu to say, okay, you've already set up basically this menu, so you can click this and blah, blah, blah. But they don't have an auto, as far as when the last time I played, they didn't have an auto leveling system.
You still have to click that.
Yeah, the custom kind of way that Smite does.
And that's why I would recommend Smite heavily, because it still builds off of Dota and League of Legends, but it's a little more friendly to its player base, and there's not a really big chat system there.
No.
Out of everything that I've seen from Smite, the biggest recommendation I would have is that it does a lot of crossovers. I feel
totally
like
does,
that's
yeah.
cool.
Oh, yeah.
They cross over the skins instead of the characters, so that's nice.
Yeah.
And like there's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in there. There's Ruby. There's Avatar. There's a couple other things that are in there, and their skins look amazing. They, of course, are still left over in the previous generation. League does this, and Dota does this, where they have exclusive skins that are for, you went to our convention, so here's the skin that we'll never release again. Or they'll be like, no, this skin was only available in 2018 over summer, and it'll never be released again. Like, they were all about exclusives. I'm like, that's dumb. You should give everybody access to those things over and over again. But,
and what they end up doing with that usually is they'll do like what Overwatch does, where they have an anniversary where
everything's available.
Where everything is available.
And so why I like Smite a lot beyond all that is it's got a really good ARAM mode where it's just single lane. You just fight. They're all random, but you have a chance to reroll those characters, which I'm pretty sure League of Legends does as well.
Yeah.
And it's a little more player friendly because there's certain items that every character will use, and so it's
like boots.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, these boots everybody's gonna grab, and these. If you're a ranged magic attacker, everybody's gonna use this item. If you're a melee physical attacker, you're gonna do this. So it's basically just balancing magic and physical, ranged and melee. So you just have to think about those two things. Otherwise, I like it because you can be, oh, what's your favorite god or goddess? Just go play them. Just go have fun with that character and learn them. Just like Pokemon is. It's like, what's your favorite Pokemon? Go play that Pokemon.
Yeah.
While League of Legends and Dota is a little harder because you don't know who the heck these characters are, to be honest. Here's the Storm is even better because you're like, what's your favorite Blizzard character? But Blizzard also has a very in-depth lore, and you might not know about it.
Yeah.
So.
What I was going to say is one of the major and more complicated things about Smite versus League of Legends is what is called skill shots. So what that means is whenever you press an ability, some abilities will either automatically target enemies or they'll like be giant circle area, like an AoE ability, things like that. League has all of the different types versus Smite is mainly skill shots because of its being third person. So you have to aim, and the aiming system tends to be a little more critical. You have to be able to hit, otherwise you're gonna miss like 3/4 of the time.
And there's also, you can mess around with those settings. It's like you can click and hold the button and you can see the outline of where you're going to aim. You can just click the button and it'll just automatically do it. And there's like a third one, and I don't remember. It's like you can click and hold it and then it'll automatically shoot it out after like a second or two.
Yeah. So and that's really where the gameplay difference is League doesn't have as many, or the skill shots in League are very impactful because you have to hit it, versus in Smite, most of everything is a skill shot. You have to hit everything, or like last hit, things like that, on the creeps and kind of roam around. Otherwise, you got to get right up in their face, so that way there's very little possibility of you missing an ability.
Yeah, but that actually goes to something perfect. It's like the differences between all these MOBAs is from Dota and League. You start losing things as you go on with MOBAs, which I actually think is a great thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
League and Dota are notoriously the most complicated MOBAs that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
They've gotten more streamlined.
Dota is the most complicated.
They've gotten more streamlined, but they've gotten more streamlined to just be like, hey, these are the items you want to use. Or it's like, hey, we put in auto things for you to help, but it's still basically the same game.
Yeah.
You've got the 3 lanes. You need to know your character in and out. You should do your research before you play a character to know how it's played. You should go on YouTube, look up people playing these characters. There's a lot of research to go into it. And as we go down the list, it gets us simpler and simpler and simpler. So when you go from League and Dota, which are the classic MOBAs out there, and you drop down to Here's the Storm, which was the next big one.
It was Blizzard's MOBA.
Which is funny because MOBA started from Blizzard.
Yeah. So it was actually made by Blizzard, and then they used all of their different franchises and characters from there. The main difference between Here's the Storm and League and Dota is there is no last hit, meaning in League and Dota, when you have creeps or enemies in general, in order to get XP and currency from them, you have to hit them right before they die.
You need to be the one that
kills them.
It was classic to be like, well, you should let the person who really needs the levels and the money get the last hit rather than trying to take it every time.
And the funny thing is supports in League especially, they have items that let them absorb currency and XP off of the AD carries last hits. But Here's the Storm gets rid of that. They don't care about last hitting enemies. They just care about pushing lanes and objectives. And their big thing is, depending on what map you're on, it's a different objective. It's not just push lane, get rid of towers, destroy base.
No, I like the gold one where it was like every mob you kill gives you gold, and then you go in to deposit that gold in the gold mines.
It's the pirate one.
Oh, this pirate one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's a ghost ship in the middle, and as you kill enemies, they would drop coins. You'd pick up the coin, and then you turn it into the ghost captain.
Oh, no, I was talking about a different one.
Oh, you're talking about the other gold mine, but when you go down to the gold mine is when you would do that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So in the
fun.
pirate one, basically, you turn in the coins, and then whichever team was the first one to turn in coins, he would then be like, I'm ready to shoot, basically. So then his cannons would shoot at whatever next base that the enemy would have. So you'd turn in your coins, then he'd do a cannon barrage at whatever was the closest enemy base. And then the other one that Mike was talking about was basically every few minutes on the map, there would be a mine shaft that would open up, and everybody would go down into the mine, and there'd be enemies down there. And every time you killed an enemy, it would increase your skull count to the point of where if your team reached the skull count first, you create a giant undead skeleton thing that would pop up on the map, and then your entire team would basically help the skeleton thing or push a different lane. And then the skeleton thing would go onto the enemy base and just destroy whatever was going on in that base.
It's like a mega creep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's things like that. I didn't play Here's the Storm for too long, but it was really fun playing it because it would keep it interesting. And I would enjoy the experience of playing it because they were actively going, instead of just releasing new characters every couple of...
That's what Dota...
Every month or something, they would actively try to make the game interesting for you, because the new characters are going to come out, and that shouldn't be the main draw of your game. Your game should be interesting without the characters,
right?
Yeah.
Then we move on to Smite and Paladins, absolutely respectively different, and but they both add in the third person, which I do like. It really makes it feel like you're actually in the game instead of playing. I'm 20, I'm a mile above these characters looking down on them, and they're just kind of dinking about and doing their own thing. Well, Smite and Paladins are like, you're in the game now. You're actually playing like a first person or like Gears of War style game. Mm-hmm. And they also reduced the game itself. So you needed to worry about less things.
Yeah.
Paladins had a mount. It had a really massive map, but they've added maps, or they added mounts. They added creeps and bases like spread out, but you could adventure between these bases, and it was a very like physically mobile type of thing, so you could go up and down in these bases and get advantage on other people. Well, Smite kept the very basic MOBA where it was very flat, but instead they would, like Richard's talking about, they had skill shots, they had a lot of things that would transcend through a map, and because of the way it was set up, it was a little harder to see things, but a little easier to see them at the same time. Yeah. Because people could hide around walls, and instead of seeing them top down and being like, oh, as soon as I got vision, I could see that person. It was like, oh, well, they could be hiding like just perfectly, and they also don't have bushes. There's no bushes in Smite.
There's more just LOS space.
Yeah, exactly. Because people could be behind a wall, and you can't see beyond that. And the mobs are really fun to fight as well. We drop over to Vainglory. Vainglory is a mobile game. Less lanes, less equipment, basically less everything.
They actually had kind of more variety. They did have a 3-lane thing as well, but everything else was simple because it was mobile. So I believe they had less item slots. I don't even remember if they did have. Items.
It was almost like a skill tree type of thing.
Oh,
It was like as you level up, you got an option between like these two abilities, and then you could go down that path for them.
That's right.
And then the items were also pretty simple. It'd be like you would have like a cast of 3 items that you would go down. It was pretty simple.
And now we're kind of on to the more interesting ones, at least for us personally. So a game that all 3 of us have played rather profusely actually started out as a potential MOBA. And it was called Project Titan, but everyone else knows it as Overwatch as to what it transitioned into. And Rich, you said you have like a bit more information about that specific, like how it came up.
So in essence, Blizzard originally wanted to jump on the MOBA bandwagon because obviously their property spawned, in essence, the MOBA genre.
That's always been a thing where I'm like, well, you guys should have done something for Blizzard.
Well,
I mean, like, they literally started the MOBA train. It came out of their product.
Yeah. And more power to them, to be fair. They went on their own directions and kind of did their own stuff.
Of a map ed.
And Dota 2 obviously got picked up by Valve and did their own thing too. But so in essence, they wanted to do that, and it kind of evolved into them creating this giant world, and instead they kind of scrapped the original idea to turn it into a MOBA and then made Heroes of the Storm instead. But Overwatch kind of turned into this overly ambitious project that they kind of steered away from and then turned it into Overwatch instead. Yeah. So their original idea was like this whole weird, complicated thing that they were trying to create all these new characters for, have this giant storyline for.
It sounded like it was almost going to be like a faction-based thing where you would be vying for control of territory through these fights.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of more or less what they're trying to do with Overwatch 2, is they're like, our original vision, we're really trying to progress into what Overwatch 2 is. But then they're like, okay, we're not going to make this a MOBA anymore. They had so many problems and like monetary problems and a bunch of other stuff like that. So they're like, all right, we need to shut down our original vision in this giant world of everything and then basically make it what we want, which was like a battler instead.
It's like I would kind of describe it as an objective primary arena shooter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like then they ditched the MOBA aspects and were like, here's Overwatch, which is just an objective shooter.
Yeah.
And then they were like, okay, let's just make Here's the Storm, which they just made a MOBA and then assigned.
Well, and that's the thing, is it was extremely successful. In fact, it's still going on, although they don't have as many team members behind Here's the Storm as they do on obviously all their other projects, but it's still running and it's still fun. And they have a ton of different characters. If you like the Blizzard characters,
they tend to suck you into it to be like, hey, you can get something really cool for this game that you actively enjoy by playing Heroes of the Storm. Come on in. Dip your toes in.
That's why I played it originally.
To be fair, though, it's also free to play, so you don't have to give, in the current frame of where Blizzard's standing now and their whole controversial whatever going on, you don't have to give them money to play that game. In fact, you're taking server away from them, which is probably a good thing. If you want to still play a Blizzard game while not actively giving them money, Here's the Storm is probably the way to go.
And honestly, the only recommendation I have towards Heroes of the Storm is that if you like a specific Blizzard character, it is fun to have more of that character.
And they're interesting and new.
Yeah,
they take the character and say, okay, what is this character's theme, and then how can it translate into a MOBA?
I still remember their most ambitious character. I don't know if it's to date, but it was their 2 players in one with the 2-headed ogre.
Oh yeah, the ogre.
Yeah, where it was like, hey, two people are gonna be controlling this one character. I was like, you guys are ambitious. I hope that works out for you.
I've tried that character a couple times with a friend of mine, and the cool thing about that character was technically whoever wanted to buy the character needed to buy the character, and then you could like
Yeah, play with somebody who didn't. Yeah,
who didn't own it, because basically you got the second head for free.
yeah. That's nice. What was funny, spawning out of this conversation directly, was there was another game that came out right before Overwatch.
Literally the week before.
Yeah.
Poor planning.
Yes. Poor planning. They should have released like a couple months, if not like 6 months before, because it was actually a really good game. Battleborn was a really fun game, but I feel like most people who played it were like, I'm just playing this till Overwatch comes out.
Which was Richard.
I will raise my hand to that.
I from the get-go was planning to get Battleborn over Overwatch. I actually only picked Overwatch up because you guys were playing it. But I loved Battleborn, and it was just a shame that Gearbox did what Gearbox does best, and that's just disappoint people with their marketing. And by that, I mean they didn't market Battleborn well.
No.
And they also thought, for whatever reason, that their poor marketing would overcome Overwatch, which was a game that A, had a beta that was hyped up for a year.
Oh, yeah.
And B, was Overwatch.
Also,
it was Blizzard.
The basic beta being very limited graphics in the game.
Yeah.
Like almost just outlines for characters, which I guess transitioned into the beta that was a little bit more fleshed out. But the basic foundation of the game was more popular than the finished Battleborn.
Well, I think it was also, at the time, Blizzard hadn't really suffered any downfall to their reputation. They were still on the up and up. Like, they were very, very popular. Everyone was like, this is Blizzard. They're releasing a shooter. We're excited about what they do.
And it wasn't a MOBA.
Yeah, at the time, Gearbox, they're like, we're doing Battleborn. And everyone's like, okay, well, Borderlands is a really, really fun single-player experience, but Gearbox has zero, if I'm remembering correctly, experience with a multiplayer platform. So people weren't as excited about that.
Borderlands multiplayer, but yeah.
But that's not competitive, so that doesn't really count.
Unless you're fighting for weapons. What?
But I really enjoyed like the hero aspect. It was very similar to the things that Michael liked about Smite, where it was third person / first person for a lot of characters, I think. Like some of the characters would go into like third person when you do specific abilities, but it was very MOBA-esque, where there were creeps, there were lanes.
And height.
Yeah, there were height. Like
game.
certain people could only get to certain areas of the map by using abilities.
And the way the creeps worked was a little bit like the minions that went on the lane and also camps.
Yeah,
that were scattered out, and the maps were very interesting too.
It was very fun, but unfortunately, it kind of suffered from its release date. I think was the biggest thing was that it just had a mass exodus of players as soon as Overwatch came out, and then because of that, there was no prolonged support.
And that was the sad part, is that it inevitably it wasn't game versus game. It was that Overwatch was slightly marketed as this MOBA that was out there, and people were like, "Oh, what's this MOBA? It's like a new MOBA." And people like when people started playing the beta, like, "Wait, this is not a MOBA. This is just a first person action game,
a co-op shooter."
Yeah, it's a co-op shooter, and that is what took people like to play it more, because it wasn't this. It wasn't like the battle royale genre. It was MOBAs were like, oh, there's like 27 different MOBAs out there, and everybody's making a MOBA. And then
Overwatch really pioneered the hero shooter.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it took away, it's like we ditched all the minion stuff. And they used to have minions in the game, because when we were talking about Project Titan, Overwatch kind of in their alphas and early creation of the game used to have minions and stuff in them. And they're like, no, this is bogging down the game. We don't need this in here. And they ditched them all. And that drew people into the game a lot more. And that's what was sad, that Battleborn was really fun, but people can't make room for multiple multiplayer games to play.
Well, and I think kind of to your point is Overwatch was something different versus Battleborn was trying to evolve out of what the same. So Battleborn took the formula like, okay, so we're going to make basically a shooter MOBA out of this. We're going to stick to the classic roots of what MOBAs are. And
make
then,
it really exciting.
Yeah, and we'll make these characters exciting. We'll make all this other stuff exciting. And then Overwatch was like, yeah, we're going to start from the basics, and then we're going to get rid of all of that stuff and basically not make a MOBA, but make a MOBA.
It also didn't help that game journalists at the time did what game journalists are well known for now, and not understand core gameplay mechanics. And they were kind of like, Battleborn is just trying to pretend to be Overwatch, despite the fact that Battleborn was released first. And it wasn't a hero shooter, but everyone wanted to make those comparisons that Battleborn was trying to be a hero shooter when it wasn't. Overwatch was a hero shooter. It had set heroes that you can't change their kit. But Battleborn was very much like, hey, we have different builds that you can do. It is very much MOBA-esque.
Yeah.
And it suffered because of that lack of marketing and bad journalism, journalism.
To be honest, with what you said earlier, if they had just released the game, I mean, it might not have been finished, but if they just released the game earlier, away from Overwatch, or later, like after Overwatch, even then they would have had a different player base getting into the game for the right reasons.
And I think they were so worried about competing. A lot of different companies do this, but they're so worried about competing that they ended up getting out competed.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think game companies have learned that. That's why not a lot of games release when Call of Duty releases. Like, same thing actually used to be for like Madden. Nothing would ever release on the same weekend as Madden.
Now
because
everything should release when Madden comes out.
Well, now, yeah.
It's terrible, yeah.
But that all leads to
now.
It was a beautiful runway for the great creation of MOBA that is Pokemon Unite. Because Pokemon Unite takes off and is basically becoming what MOBA should be today, which is all about quick action and getting people into it.
Simple and fun.
Relatively pain-free.
Yeah.
And we do have some opinions about it as well. Like,
no, we love it. We'll just say only positive things.
Sponsor us, Nintendo.
Oh, yeah. If you want to send me one of the new OLED switches, sponsor us. I won't say anything bad now.
Pokemon brings in stationary camps, which is not something brand new, but there is no minions that go up and down besides Rotom. There's shared experience for the most part. It's not a straight share. It's not both people get equal.
But there is an item that does that.
Yes, but it's still the person who is
last hit.
Yeah, last hit gets the most, but you still share it a little bit.
Yeah.
Items are all preset before the match. So you still have to learn them a little bit, but it's not that difficult because there's not like 70 items out there and you don't have to build them as you're going.
Yeah.
Obviously, Pokemon does suffer a little bit monetarily because the
fact that you can upgrade your items
with money
is ridiculous.
And also to upgrade the items using the currency in-game, it takes a lot, and you're not getting that much.
Yeah. It suffers from Battlefront 2 syndrome, where basically in Battlefront 2, when they first monetized the game, anybody who was paying would get way out ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, same with Diablo, even though it didn't matter for Diablo.
Yeah.
And they also have, I guess it's a similar thing, but they have roles. They have their own described roles.
Yes.
While like every other MOBA, you can understand, it's got the same similar terminology. Mm-hmm. Pokemon, being Pokemon, always has to have their own names for things. But I think in this case, they've really, really friendlied it up. Yeah. And they're like, Speedsters, the Jungler. Yeah. And then they have Attack and
they
all-rounder.
describe what the character does. Speedsters are faster than everybody else about moving around the map, so they're roamers. Defenders obviously can take more damage. All-rounders are all-around characters.
And they do what I like with newer games is that they have the two categories. They have multiple descriptors for the characters that they can all be a little bit mixed. Like you might have an attack speedster, you may have a ranged speedster, and all of that is really fun. And then on top of that, they have KOs, not kills. So every time you defeat a Pokemon and the Pokemon faints, you see a little Pokeball that pops up and the Pokemon disappears. Every single time you defeat an enemy player character, when they are defeated, they vanish and a little Pokeball pops up.
Yeah.
And then you collect Pokeballs throughout the map. And then you deposit those Pokeballs, and that's the points in the game. And I think that's really friendly, at least for kids who are playing or trying to get into MOBA, like your daughter.
It's not murder, it's just brutality.
Yeah, until they faint. And so even though kids will still say, I killed you, it's like the game is actively trying to be a lot friendlier towards each other. Which is funny because that's one of my bigger negatives is because it's so friendly and easygoing is that when you're trying to play casually, a lot of times you will lose because the people who are playing don't know how to play the game.
Yeah.
So inevitably, the saltiness comes instead of saltiness on others. It's just saltiness just in general in the game, and sometimes towards yourself because you're just like, I can't help you. There's no chat system, and it kind of sucks because we're all having fun, but you're obviously being outclassed by people who know how to play a MOBA game.
It's weird that when you play a game that it doesn't have an inherent chat system other than pre-built messages, and which is technically a flaw of the Switch, does not have in-game voice chat either, that we use Discord to discuss things with each other instead of the actual game.
Yeah.
That's weird. And I mean, like I said, it's a weird kind of out of bounds Nintendo thing, and that's just what we deal with Nintendo because it's a solid game. It's just, as a MOBA, you figure you want to be able to chat with your team, and you want to be able to tell them what's going on.
Also, the chat system is a little weird because instead of going, go top lane, go bottom lane, go to Zapdos,
It says,
they're all like,
I'm going there.
yeah, it says what I'm doing. It's like, I need backup. I need support. Or it says like things that like you're saying them. I'm like, to be honest, doesn't really help. Like, really at all? To be like, I need this because nobody's really paying attention to you.
Nope.
But like the automatic messages are nice. Like it auto says when you're going back to base. It does a lot of things naturally that make the game really, really easy to pick up. So, I mean, as an all-around statement, if you're trying to pick up a MOBA game, Pokemon is probably your best bet. If you don't have a Switch, I would probably go backwards from newest MOBAs that have come out. Go try a mobile MOBA.
Yeah.
Well, and actually, Pokemon is going to be releasing a mobile version in September.
Haha. So I would try anything that's as easy as possible, and then go to something that you like, theme-wise or culturally-wise, because you're going to be more invested if you can play the characters that like you're invested in the lore and like how the character plays, than getting into a game that you're like, I have no idea who these characters, none of them matter, and I don't know why they're here. So that would be my general overview. We've already talked about toxicity. We know I don't know about you guys, but I know League of Legends and Dota are probably the most toxic games out there.
Well,
I would say League is, but
I think League is over Dota 2, but that's just because
people angry.
Well,
Yeah.
and because Dota 2, it's either you know how to play it or you don't.
People angry in random mode.
Yeah.
And I was going to say that's probably one of my biggest criticisms about Pokemon is that because it is accessible, you get a wider range of people going into it. But at its core, MOBAs tend to be very role-oriented games. So it's very, very apparent when people don't understand those roles or they don't follow those roles, and things fall apart because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when someone takes away jungle mobs from the jungler, Michael.
Richard, I play Gengar. Gengar is the jungler. So.
Oh, I was jungling and you were not playing Gengar, so.
But,
that's true.
moving on from that that brotherly dynamic,
But
if you guys...
that explains the roles.
Yeah.
pretty well.
If you guys have any sort of interactions with MOBAs that you know of and we haven't mentioned, let us know. Even if it's a MOBA that we haven't mentioned, let us know if you think we should look into it.
Also, let us know if there's a topic that you really want us to talk about. We have multiple guests that we would love to bring on and talk about a topic you probably know. We also would love to learn about things. So we're always we have a long, long, long list of different topics that we would love to cover. I think it's over 50 right now.
Yeah.
But if you have anything specifically, because we would love to hear what you want to talk about, not just us.
We can add it to the priority list. And also, if you think, those guest episodes, we really like them, have more of them, let us know. But if you also think, guests are stinky, I want to hear more of Corey, and he's great. Or I want to hear more of Michael, because he talks all the time, and he's very consistent. Or I want to hear more of Richard.
I was going to say, you can just ignore me. That's fine. No one likes me.
But let us know. We love the feedback. You can find us on whatever social media you're on. We're on at Generally Casual. And then, we've been saying the rate, review, subscribe, but we will also be transitioning, hopefully, to a YouTube model. So let us know. Like it however you can.
Subscribe, and press that bell icon.
No, oh my God. I was trying to avoid that. It's been ruined. And I'm sorry. Let us know in the description if Michael just ruined this episode entirely. Just
at
then.
Generally Casual or
send us an email if you have to. Yeah. And thank you.
And as always, try to be nice to each other, please.
No salt.